Good morning. Welcome to Second Parish in Hingham, Unitarian Universalist. It is a joy to be gathered together this morning. A beautiful sunny day, the sun shining off the snow, and you're smiling, and that makes it brighter too. A couple of announcements this morning. For one thing, the repair to the floor in the accessible entryway has been completed, and we can now use the side door. And Lisa, thank you so much for shepherding that repair all the way through. Also, thanks to John, the plumbing has been repaired downstairs, and we're grateful for that as well. And thank you to Julie and to Gayla and to Susan for their work on the drive-by hugs and kisses last Sunday. It was so much fun to see so many different ages come by for chocolate hugs and kisses. And if you have clicked the link in the weekly update, you can see pictures of everyone who came, blowing a kiss, putting their arms out for hugs, and I think it will make you smile. With those announcements, our service will begin. We gather together today to honor the universal community of seekers to which we all belong. We call into our presence this hour our ancestors, whose love, labor, and commitment made it possible for us to be here now. Let us open to this moment with hearts that have no borders. I invite you to light your chalice at home and to say the covenant of Second Parish, the promise we make to each other each week. With love for each other and with respect for each person's search for truth, we unite in the spirit of Jesus for the worship of God and the service of our neighbors. This morning's reading is from a poem by Phyllis Wheatley. It is entitled, His Excellency, General Washington. And before I read the excerpt, I need to tell you, if you don't already know, that Wheatley was a slave from West Africa who arrived in Boston in 1761. She was about 7 years old. She could not read, she could not write, and she could not speak English. But the family that bought her taught her how to read and write, as well as do the chores they wanted her to do. And she was such a quick study. By 1773, she published a book of original poems. It was the first book by an African-American woman to be published in the colonies, the second one to be published by a woman. And this particular poem, To His Excellency, General Washington, she wrote in 1775, before the Declaration of Independence, before George Washington became a subject of adulation and poetry. She is considered to be a groundbreaker in the Washington legend as the father of our country. And as you hear this poem, it will sound probably a little bit different to you from what I usually read. It is in the style of Alexander Pope, who was a great English poet from the 18th century. You will notice very sophisticated use of language, diction, poetic techniques, and references to gods of antiquity. So let's step back in time for a minute and just hear this excerpt. The goddess comes. She moves divinely fair. Olive and laurel binds her golden hair. Wherever shines this native of the skies, unnumbered charms and recent graces rise. In bright array, men seek the work of war, where high unfurled the ensign waves in the air. Shall I to Washington their praise recite? Enough, thou knowest them in the fields of fight. Thee, first in peace and honors, we demand the grace and the glory of thy martial band. Famed for thy valor, for thy virtues more, hear every tongue thy guardian aid implore. Proceed, great chief, with virtue on thy side. Thy every action let the goddess guide. A crown, a mansion, and a throne that shine with gold unfading. Washington, be thine. Wow, children, have you ever heard a poem like that? It sure isn't Dr. Seuss, is it? Who have we got for children this morning? I see Tessa in Gloucester. Hi, Tessa. And I see Nola in Norwell. And I see Molly in Hingham. Oh, aren't we lucky to have these children? And I bet there's some younger brothers somewhere around in some of these screens, and maybe a younger sister too. So unmute yourselves, and we'll chat for a little bit. I have to tell you, it was wonderful to see you, many of you, at the drive-by hugs and kisses, the chocolate hugs and kisses. It was the first time some of you have been at church in a long time. Did the church look the same?
No, yeah.
Yes and no. Well, which is it? Sort of? It was different because of the snow, wasn't it? What else was different?
Kind of different.
What?
Kind of different.
Kind of different. Was that because nobody was there? Well, not many people were there?
It was actually because of like the sign and how there's just a couple people in the church, but there's not much people, and it's more like just the white.
Okay, so it was different because we had that wonderful sign that the children made saying, "We love you, food pantry." And it was different because there were just a few people, but the white side was the same, wasn't it? Yeah. You know, when you were coming to church, and Tessa, when you drive around your town, do you see other churches? Are there other churches besides Second Parish in the world?
Are there other churches in the world? Oh, Tessa's saying yeah.
Yeah. You know, Tessa, I'm not surprised you're nodding your head right away because I looked this up this morning, and do you know, Church Finder on the internet told me there are 20 churches in Gloucester.
Oh,
20.
Marblehead.
Marblehead. I don't know how many there are in Marblehead. I thought you were in Gloucester. I'm sorry. Well, there's a lot of churches up your way. And NOLA, there are at least 6 churches in Norwell. Did you know that? Yeah.
I always see one while I'm going to school, though.
You see one when you go to school? Do you know the name of it?
St. Helens.
St. Helens. Okay, yeah, I know that church. And Molly, and good morning, Caleb. You just wake up?
Not really, but still
Okay. There are 14 places of worship in Hingham. Used to be 15, and then the Christian Science Church closed. So there are a lot of different churches. And here's my question. Why do you think we've got so many different churches? Nola?
Because people might not want to go to the same one.
Okay.
The same one as other people, so there needs to be more than one church so people can choose which church they want to go to.
What a thoughtful answer. Yes, maybe there are lots of churches so people can choose what kind of church they want to go to. That's a pretty good explanation. And aren't we lucky to live in a place where we can choose what church we go to? And you know, one of the people we can thank for that is somebody who's called the father of our country. Anybody know who that might be? Who's the father of our country?
George Washington.
Yes, Grammy knew that one. George Washington. And George Washington, well, father of our country, felt that everybody should be comfortable worshiping in the way that they want to. And he thought it was really important we have these choices and that we help each other and be kind to each other. And do you know what? He thought that people should worship in love and respect. Does that sound like anything you hear every week?
Yes.
What does it sound like?
It sounds like our forget what
It's
we
a big,
call-
long word. We say it at the beginning of the service, right?
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
it's something we say every church.
Right, and I call it a promise a lot of the time. But officially, it's a covenant. What we say in the beginning, with love for each other and respect for each person's search for truth. So today when I talk to the adults, I'm going to be talking about George Washington and how he thought we should all have respect for the many ways there are to worship. And that's going to be what we talk about. Lee, do you want to say anything about what's going to happen in Sunday Adventures?
Sure. We are going to read this book called One about colors and numbers, and actually it's got a lot of important things to talk about, which we'll talk about afterwards. These colors and numbers have a lot to teach us. And then we have a couple videos to watch. One of them, Newton and Sam and Ziegler made with me this weekend, and I can't wait to show it to you guys. So we will see you inside Sunday Adventures. Everybody has the link, and we'll see you in there in just a minute.
How exciting. You're going to see a world premiere of one of Lee's videos.
Yeah, world
Yay.
premiere.
Woohoo! Well, have great Sunday Adventures. And as you do that, we're going to listen to Gabrielle sing. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Can you wave? Can everybody wave? Tessa, give me a wave, please. Thank you. Yeah, there we go. Have fun.
Lead kindly light amid the encircling gloom. Lead thou me on.
Thank you, Gabrielle. As we think of our joys and concerns this morning, what a joy to hear Gabrielle singing. And she told us before the service that there is another joy. She is expecting another baby. So in August, little Undine will have a sibling. We're all pretty excited, and I'm sure that you are too. That is just wonderful, wonderful news. We have sad news. We have sad news that Chip's Uncle Eddie, whom we had been praying for, who returned home with hospice, did pass away. And so we keep Chip and his family in our thoughts. Ken, our dear friend Ken, is struggling at South Shore Hospital. And we keep him, we keep his family, and we keep those who are trying to care for him in our thoughts at a very difficult time. Lynn's sister is in rehab. She is in pain. And so there are many prayers that we surround our good friends with, hoping for peace, release, recovery, and understanding. And Lee's mom had to have a second shoulder surgery because the first one did not quite work. But she had it, and she's doing well now. So that is mixed news, but moving in the direction we might like. There are many joys and sorrows that we have to share, and let us reflect on them as we sing together, Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Spirit of Life, known by many names, served by many hands, held in many hearts. Hear us as we express our constant and our deepest thoughts. How blessed we are by the many resources that enable us to enjoy the gentle snowfall of the past few days. May we remember those who presently lack the resources that help to sustain us. And may we find constructive ways to share with those in need so that we all might be sustained. We think especially of those in Texas who suffer from lack of electricity and water and other basic necessities. May our compassion ever keep us open to finding ways to reach out with compassion and problem solve with vision. In joy this morning, we celebrate our recent Hugs and Kisses drive-by, knowing what a small gesture it was, but what joy it was to share such smiles. And what a delight to see John, whose recovery from COVID we have had on our minds and in our hearts, drive by to share the love. What a gift to see the photos online. We also celebrate the increased access to vaccines and hope for more of us to be vaccinated, even as we continue wearing masks and observe social distancing. May the system of vaccinating grow more efficient and effective. We feel joy at the completion of work on the floor on our side entry. Grateful to Lisa for ensuring that this happened, and thankful for the patience of those who have trudged in through other entryways. All are grateful for its completion, and we are grateful for John's work with the plumbing. But of course, a tremendous joy this morning is knowing that Gabrielle is going to have another little singer. With concern, though, we think of Chip, whose Uncle Eddie passed away. May the time of his passing have provided his family with assurances and expressions of love. We also think of Ken, returned to South Shore Hospital, and we hold John and Lynn and all of their family in our hearts, including Lynn's sister, Sally. Our prayers, too, go to Lee's mother, having had a second surgery. May all the joys and concerns we share be in our hearts, joining our private joys and concerns. As we pray now, together but in silence, with the echo of the bell. And now let us raise our voices in the New Zealand Prayer Book version of the Lord's Prayer. Eternal Spirit, earth maker, pain bearer, life giver, source of all that is and that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God in whom is heaven. The hallowing of your name echoes throughout the universe. The way of your justice be followed by the peoples of the earth. Your heavenly will be done by all created beings. Your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope and come on earth. With the bread we need for today, feed us. In the hurts we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of temptation and test, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For you reign in the glory of the power that is love, now and forever. Amen. It is time for the morning offering. Your donations today will go to the good work of this church. They will be received with gratitude and respect and love and hope that what little we can do will make the difference, that will make more difference possible. Please give from your heart.
Glory, hallelujah, I shall not be moved. Anchored in Jehovah, I shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the waters,
Thank you. On the ceiling of the U.S. Capitol building's rotunda is painted the Apotheosis of Washington. It was painted in 1865 by Constantino Brumidi. And it shows Washington rising to the heavens in glory, flanked by two female figures, one representing liberty and the other victory or fame. The title of the painting is important, apotheosis, meaning that someone is raised to the rank of God or glorified as an ideal. And it is a suitable title for a painting of a man who became a national icon. A little over 100 years after Brumidi painted the apotheosis of George Washington, Arnold Freiberg would paint a different image of Washington for our nation's bicentennial. This one was based on one of the many stories that were told about George Washington that Parson Weems collected, and for many years people thought were completely true. In this particular story, a contemporary of Washington's came upon him as Washington was kneeling in the snow at Valley Forge in prayer. This individual who came across Washington was against the war, but when he saw Washington in prayer, he changed his mind. 2 years ago, this particular painting was on display at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. Now, these two paintings with contradictory images, one of Washington as a god and the other of Washington as a supplicant, suggest the challenges of attempting to definitively categorize Washington's faith. They also may suggest the tendency to bring modern perspective to historical personages. And both paintings reveal how someone's personal theology can color the perception of somebody else's faith. We all have to be careful how we interpret George Washington's faith. Given his exceptional role in leading the American colonies and the young United States, it's no surprise that so many through the generations would want to claim Washington as their particular hero, and by extension then as an embodiment of their particular form of courage or outlook or religion or spirituality, whether that be fervent or whether it be more relaxed. But the shoe may not quite fit. Now, I am not a George Washington scholar, and I think that needs to be very clear. But in preparing for this sermon, I have read several sources, information from a wide range of scholars who purport to know a great deal about George Washington. And I've discovered many descriptions of him. One description says he was a profound Christian, someone who embraced the idea of salvation through Jesus, someone who saw a vision of Mary at Valley Forge. But I've also read that his pastor in Philadelphia said that, in his opinion, he didn't think Washington believed in Christian revelation. I've read a description of Washington as a stoic, someone who elevates virtue and reason as the highest values, someone impervious to pleasure or pain. But I've also read descriptions of him as a typical 18th century colonial Southern Anglican gentleman whose responsibilities of church leadership carried more weight than his personal beliefs. I've read of him described as a deist, someone who believes that there was a creator, but the creator is not presently involved in the world. But then another description, not unlike Phyllis Wheatley's in our morning poem, of him being guided by an involved goddess, first in peace and honors, famed for valor and for virtues, and somewhat holy himself. I guess such is the fate of great heroes, recipients of our deepest wishes and hopes and dreams. in all of what we want from the man called the father of our country, the great hero of the American Revolution and the beginning of our fragile experiment in democracy. Upon what can we all agree with regards to his approach to faith? Whether he knelt for his prayers, as some describe, or whether he stood for his prayers, as others insist, might not be as important as the fact that he did pray. He did recognize a greater power, one involved and interested in what was happening in North America, one involved in his own life and his own career. And certainly, even if we disagree on its exact nature, we have ample evidence that acknowledgement of this greater power played an important role in his public life. For 22 years, after all, he was a vestryman of the Truro Parish, where his home, Mount Vernon, was located. And actually, Mount Vernon was so large, it touched on a second parish, and he served for that church as well. As a vestryman, he was something like our leadership board members, helping to manage the business side of the church. And actually, in fulfilling these duties, he got quite a bit of experience in self-government that would help him later. And he also served as a church warden, too, looking after the poor, seeking opportunities to help anyone less fortunate, something to which he and his wife, Martha, were actively and consistently, generously committed. As a general in the Continental Army, religion was also important to him. He made sure that there were an adequate number of chaplains for his troops. With all that his army had to worry about, that astonishes and impresses me. Not only did he make sure there were an adequate number of chaplains, but he insisted that a variety of faiths be represented by these chaplains, because the troops themselves practiced a variety of faiths. And Washington felt very strongly that men should be able to worship as they were accustomed. He proactively sought to avoid religious disputes in the Army, anticipating some anti-Catholicism and making sure it was not given expression. Washington saw faith as one of the 4 sturdy pillars of his military command of the Continental Army. He respected the favor of a divine providence. He insisted on Sunday worship for everyone, unless the soldier was on guard duty. And he forbid any military activities, if possible, on Sundays. Washington's actions clearly reveal that he saw religion as necessary to organize and guide his public life. Evident in his military command, evident in his church work, but this attitude was also evident in his private life. From an early age, he had adhered to the rules of civility for guidance. The rules of civility were maxims created and put down by the Jesuits, maxims that guided one's behavior. And as a youngster, Washington copied out all 110 of those rules. They focused on outward actions and appearances in terms of etiquette, but the historian Richard Brookhiser maintains that they indirectly address moral issues, seeking to form the inner man by shaping the outer. As an adult, Washington grasped the importance of moral grounding and paired it with religion in his farewell address, where he said, and I'll quote him, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports." In his 2011 biography, George Washington, A Life, Ron Chernow identifies morality as what Washington saw as being essential for being a true Christian. Good works combining with faith to the betterment of all. Chernow actually references Washington's contemporary, John Marshall, observing that Washington felt discomfort with religious dogma, which also reflected his low-key personal style. Instead, Washington and his wife had a reputation for expressing the golden rule in action, always helping anyone who came to their door looking for help or food, donating liberally and anonymously to the needy, and especially funding education for orphaned and indigent children. Washington relied on actions over words, and Chernow himself suggests that Washington was not one to contemplate theology. In fact, Chernow describes him as, quote, lacking a speculative bend and never one to ponder the finer points of theology, end quote. The Reverend Forrest Church, a Unitarian Universalist minister, has written a book about the Founding Fathers and the separation of church and state. The book is entitled So Help Me God. And Forrest Church notes that Washington had just one religious test. Actions count, words don't. Now, some have questioned Washington's commitment to religion based on the fact that he never took communion. Actually, Reverend Church points out that there were many worshipers in that time period who skipped communion. And others have questioned Washington's faith because he did not attend church every Sunday. He attended frequently. I think we could say he was a regular attendee, but he was not one who went every single Sunday. Though it is interesting that when he traveled, he took great advantage, when he could, of visiting churches outside of his Anglican comfort zone, visiting Quaker churches and Catholic churches too. And here's where I think we come to what's most important about Washington's faith with regard to the impact that it has had on others. He was open-minded about religion. He rejected the idea that any individual group should attempt to impose their moral or political agenda on society at large, or else, he believed, the nation would be beset by faction. Now, that may explain some of his trouble with the Quakers, because they insisted on opposition to slavery. And Reverend Church tells us that Washington believed slavery should be, quote, gradually and judicially reformed, but if done so by challenging constitutionally established authority, social order would be compromised. And Washington would not endorse that. Well, we might look at that stance with 21st century eyes and be disappointed, but that stance is consistent with Washington's time period. And actually, Washington reaches into the future, according to historian Henry Weinsick, who writes in An Imperfect God, George Washington, His Slaves, and the Creation of America, that Washington did not believe in racial superiority. He felt that with freedom and with education and with work opportunities, African Americans would prosper in this country. George Washington welcomed people of all beliefs, and though he had some issues with the Quakers, I've already said he would attend Quaker meetings at times. He welcomed people of all beliefs, and he welcomed people with no beliefs, as long as they adhered to good works, as long as they didn't feel that everyone had to believe the way they did. And it's quite significant that Washington did not call this attitude tolerance. He wrote to a Jewish congregation in Newport, Rhode Island, quote, "We must move intentionally beyond the condescending virtue of tolerance to express true respect. It is now no more than toleration. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of as if it was by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoy the exercise of their inherent natural rights. The government of the United States requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens. Demean, in this context, is a rather archaic usage of the word to mean deport or show themselves. With this in mind, any of the proclamations and the letters and the prayers that Washington wrote sought to use inclusive language. He did not refer to Jesus Christ very often. And as Ron Chernow tells us, he preferred such what Chernow calls vague locutions as providence, destiny, the author of our being, or simply heaven, instead of the word God. Outwardly, at least, his Christianity, this is Chernow, seems rational, short of mysteries and miracles, and nowhere does he directly affirm the divinity of Jesus Christ. Doing so produced what John Meacham calls in his 2007 book, American Gospel, about the faith of the founders, the groundwork for a public religion, a spirit of kindness to others, a generous moral disposition, and rituals acknowledging a dependence on a divine providence. George Washington, honored and appropriated by people of so many beliefs, was a person of great faith. Faith with action. A man of his times, he fulfilled his responsibilities that he felt were his duties. He honored a higher being and felt that that being was involved in his life and all lives. He recognized what a person does as being a better indicator of faith than what the person might say, and he was open to so many ways that people could indicate that they had faith. He sought to unite people of different faiths by using inclusive language to call them to prayer. He was a leader of another time and another age. But his faith offers many lessons for our own time and our own age. I invite you to zoom in to church chat after the postlude and perhaps express some of your thoughts about George Washington as we anticipate his actual birthday tomorrow. Till then, let me leave you with these words. We affirm that every one of us is held in creation's hand, a part of the interdependent cosmic web, and hence strangers need not be enemies. Hence, no one is saved unless we all are saved, where all means the whole of creation. Amen.